is Tom Mills, and welcome to this session on leveraging the UI themes, a new feature in PowerBuilder 2019. Before we get started, standard disclaimer: if anything goes wrong, this is my fault, not Appion's. As far as the session agenda goes, I'll talk a little bit about me and the company I work for. Then we'll just do a basic overview of the UI themes. Spend a little bit of time on customizing and creating UI themes. Talk about some of the constraints in the current release of the theming. That's important to know, and just to be realistic. Then some tips for working within these constraints, just things that we've done in our software that we found useful. And then finally some coding solutions to help extend the built-in functionality, and questions if there's any time. So about me, I am the senior software architect for Foundation Software. Been programming in PowerBuilder for 20 years. Also most Windows development environments. As far as my company, I work for Foundation Software. We are a ISV that creates construction accounting software along with project management, mobile applications, and payroll services. Been in business for a pretty long time, so we are successful and old. So let's get started. First, let's just start with a basic overview of the UI themes. First nice thing is that there's really no coding just to get started, to get yourself up and running. It's a checkbox, or I should say a drop-down pick. Currently, PowerBuilder includes 4 themes: a blue, gray, silver, and a dark theme, all on a flat design. You can also create your own themes, and let's look at some of that. Just dive right in so you can actually see what the theming looks like. Let me change over to our PowerBuilder here. Before I do the theming, I'll show you what our application looks like standard. So here's just a preview, some controls, normal state. Here's disabled for things that support disabled, some extra controls here. See list view, tree view, some user objects. This little calculator is an embedded user object in a bigger user object that's then laid on this tab page. Same thing sort of here. These are embedded user objects as tab pages and a tab control, just to show the effect that how theming works with user objects. Okay, so let's and so data windows. Stole this out of our application, so this is a freeform style data window and then the tabular. So let's go ahead and turn on theming. So it's pretty simple. Just click additional properties on the application object under themes. There's your options, so you can select blue, and when we run, we'll see the effect of the theming. So there's the blue theme, so much flatter, much more contemporary look. Look at some of the other objects here. The light themes aren't so pronounced with the list boxes and the tree views, but the dark themes do show up a little bit more. So here's the user objects. You can see the buttons being themed. Checkboxes, get the little blue check. So much more contemporary looking. We'll look at one more. Let's look at the dark theme. It's a bit more radical. So themes and dark. Let's run this. So there you can see the dark theme, so much more pronounced. One thing I do want to point out is keep an eye on these date pickers and the date control, month control. I will explain later in the constraints what's going on there. It's a limitation of the operating system, unfortunately. But you can see here's the the controls, border highlights, button selection, sliders, those kind of things. You can look at some of the other ones. So tree view, different appearance, user objects, theming's working inside of user objects. Data windows, so much more flat look here. Oh, and that's something we can talk about too. So let me close out of here. So pretty much just putting that option on in the additional properties, themes, got us going. Let me put this back to off for right now. Jump back over to the slides. Okay. So what are themes? A theme is basically a folder containing a bunch of image files and a instruction form file in a JSON format called the theme.json file. That instruction file lets you control what themes, what colors, the colors, the border styles, the images used for various UI controls. So yeah, you can theme text and background colors, borders, and then what images are used for the various glyphs, radio buttons, drop-down arrows, checkboxes. And also for a lot of the controls, you can actually theme by state, hover, active, disabled, etc. We just saw this, enabling themes through the Application Additional Properties theme tab. A note about the theme path field, that tells PowerBuilder where to find the theming information when you're running out of the IDE. It has no bearing on the actual built application. And finally, you can also apply themes at runtime. There is an apply theme method provided on PB where you can just specify the name. So going forward, the theme path in that the dialog can be given either an absolute or relative path. And when a relative path is used, it's going to look in for a path relative to your target file, your PowerBuilder application target file. And when you're running out of the IDE from a deployed application, it's going to look for it relative to your exe. And finally, one thing here is just to be aware, themes are only in effect when you run the application. They do not show up in the painters or anywhere in the IDE. Similarly, the apply theme function can also be given an absolute or relative path. When you use a relative path there, when you're running out of the IDE, that path will be relative to the theme path field value. And then when you're running out of the from an exe, a built exe outside of the IDE, it's going to be looking for a folder called theme190, which should be located in the same folder as where the exe is that you're running from. Something to note that you can call the apply theme multiple times to change the theme, but for it to work correctly, you do need to close and reopen all the windows. Okay, the location of the standard themes. Themes are in the Appeon program files folder under shared PowerBuilder and theme version, where version is the version number. So right now it's version theme 190. I can take a quick peek at that. Pop into here. So here we are in theme 190 program files, shared PowerBuilder theme 190. Here you can see the 4 folders for each of the themes. Inside you can see these are all the resources, images that are used, and then this theme.json file, which is the instructions for how to apply these and the colors that are contained therein. The name of the folder determines the theme as they show up in the IDE. Finally, a word of warning, if you use the Restore tab in the IDE, so flip back over here, under additional themes, so if you messed around with the themes, the original ones, and you want to get the originals back, the ones that shipped with PowerBuilder 2019, you click the Restore tab and it'll restore them. But what have had happened a couple times is that Windows UAC jumps in and redirects those files. Instead of them going back into that folder, they get moved to the virtual store folder, which is under your user app data. So if you suddenly see your theme folders disappear, don't freak out. They'll be over here in the virtual store. Okay, some finer points of UI themes. One thing to note is that the UI themes are purely a rendering feature. They only appear at runtime. You will not see any of the effect in your code. You'll not be able to really even determine in the code that something's being themed. So, for example, if you're accessing the color, border, etc. properties of any of the data windows or any controls, you're going to get the design time colors or values. You're not going to get the values the theme is using, and that makes sense because heaven forbid you're actually basing business logic on a color property, but if they went ahead and expose the actual color properties, it could potentially change someone's business logic if they were doing something bad. Also, when you fetch the data window syntax, you're going to get back the original syntax. You're not going to get anything that has any kind of themed syntax. And pretty much all the ways of assigning data windows, getting information in and out, it'll always get themed. You'll always end up with a themed data window. So you really can't not have a themed data window when you're running other themes. Okay, let's look at customizing and creating themes. So a couple ways you can customize or create themes. You can either edit directly in the PowerBuilder theme folder if you want to play around. Um, and then you can always use that restore button. But like I said, just be aware that that restore button is going to possibly move the things over to that virtual store. So probably better to copy that folder and make your changes to it, just a modified version of the folder. You can also create a new theme by duplicating one of the existing folders, basing your design on that, and then just make changes to it. And if it's, as long as it appears in that theme 190 folder, it will be picked up by the IDE and shown in that dropdown based on the name of the folder you give it for the name of the theme. So theme.json file, just real briefly, this gives you an idea what it looks like. Just property settings. Per control of different objects, each type of UI control has its own section. You can turn drawing on and off by setting that parameter right there. So if you don't want your data windows themed, you can set this to false on the data window option. Uh, for things like checkboxes, radio buttons, they're getting drawn based on an image file that sits in that same theme folder. So that file parameter specifies the exact name of the file that will be used to render that type of glyph. And then the color values, just be aware they're in HTML, so they're HTML codes for the color values. There's a border parameter, pretty much 0, different based on the values. It'll determine where it's pulling the actual data windows border setting for the data window from. So if it's 0, it's going to use the setting in the original data window painter. If it's 1, the border will always be drawn, and if it's 2, the border will never be drawn. And just a note, when it is drawn, the style is always going to be style box. So let's do a quick demo here. So what I've done is, if I pop over here and go to, open up a new Explorer and go to my resources for this session. Okay, I have a flat design green, and what I essentially did was I just did a batch conversion of all the images in the folder with a paint program to change the hue to a greenish shade. So wouldn't want to at all provide this to users, but it's just to illustrate the point. And then I also made some changes in here to the theme.json file to just change the values over to green values instead of the blue ones. So let me copy this guy, and we will put him back in the theme 190 folder. Okay, there it came. So let's hop back over to the IDE. So now when I go into additional properties, there's my flat design green, so I can pick that one. And when we run, there's our green UI. So like I said, probably wouldn't want to give this to users. It's too radioactive, but see, it's following along. So the shading and all that just kept it consistent with the blue shades that I'd based it off of. So that's pretty much, it's pretty straightforward to create them. You can definitely go around in that theme.json file. It's pretty, it reads well. So let's jump back to our slides. Okay, so thing I really want to talk about, constraints in the current release of the UI themes. These are just stuff you need to be aware of. There are some things that don't get themed right now. So currently line, rectangle, round rectangle, picture, picture hyperlink, animation, Olay control, and ActiveX controls are not being themed. Only the border for rich text edits are being themed, so not the background or anything. Themes have no effect on windows, title bars, toolbars, menu borders, system buttons, or scroll bars in PB 2019. In R2, they will. And in fact, I'm running R2 here, a beta for R2, and in the examples I've been showing you, you can actually see that the title bars are getting themed correctly. Big thing right now is one of the big limitations is that pretty much in PowerBuilder 2019 theming is an all or nothing. You can't selectively say don't theme this control, or this is something special, just or I want to use a different type of theme for this type of control. 2019 R2 will remove that limitation, and you'll be actually able to create individual theme.json files for any control, so that pretty much anything can be overridden and have a custom look. Some other limitations, data window title bar, status bar, MDI docking windows aren't being themed. Um, Most of the dialogues you're open save as filter sort and system dialogues uh, are not affected by themes currently. R2 will add support for the non-system dialogues like filter and sort. Data window buttons are not themed when displaying images, and we'll actually see a workaround for that. And a couple of data window presentation styles are not being themed. And then finally, when printing or saving as a PDF, themes are not applied. And okay, one other thing to note is that, and this is realistic, that if a data window has an expression on a property that would normally be altered by a theme, the theming engine will not touch it. It's not going to overwrite any kind of logic. So if you have expressions to disable or make a field look disabled, it's not going to overwrite that. So it's something you'd have to deal with after the fact. Uh, just be aware. So even when your theme says don't draw borders, there are some controls that will still draw with a box border drop downs. And this is what I was referring to back when I was showing you the demo. The date time picker controls, those are wrappers around the newer Windows controls. I believe they were introduced with Vista. Those controls actually are very limited in how much you can do to paint them. So unfortunately, the PB engineering team is pretty restricted on what they can do with those. So just something to be aware of. So we can blame Microsoft. Finally, there's a good section in the online help about understanding what can be set by a theme that I highly recommend you look at. Plus, it'll be up to date as they continue to add features and remove some of the constraints. Okay, tips. I have two tips I wanted to show you for working within these constraints. The first is dealing with data window expressions for disabled fields. So if you are using data window expressions to make a field appear disabled based on another value in a row, as I mentioned, the theming engine's not going to touch that. So as a result, you're not going to get the correct theme for when it's enabled. It's going to maintain its design time color for its enabled state. And that's pretty much what we just said. So what I found was instead of using the color properties of the object, you can actually use the text transparency setting. And this works well because the transparency setting is not in any way used by the theming logic. So I can show you an example. And one thing right now is just to note is that this is producing a sort of odd halo effect on the dark theme. But we'll take a peek. So let's have a demo here. So let me switch back over. I believe I left this at that, so let me turn this off. Theming, let's see what we're actually talking about. So if I go back into this session application, I put some wording in. Oh, by the way, this program will be available in the materials for downloading. So I did try to put some comments in here to try to explain what was going on. But essentially, you can see right here, I have this allowed discount column and discount date. So only if the allowed discount is checked should this field appear enabled or be enabled. So you can see there that we toggle it on and off. And then, so that's messing with the background color of the data window object. This one is using the text transparency setting. So you see that. So it still indicates it's disabled. It's it's different than that, but this will work much better with the theming. So let's go turn theming on. And we'll do dark themes because most things are pronounced under dark theme, more pronounced. Now when we go over to here, you can see that the one that was using the expression on the background color was not touched by the theming engine. So even when it's enabled, it's not going to look right. It's just going to be stuck there. Whereas the one where we're using the font transparency, text transparency setting, that is tracking well. With the color of the theme. So it's pretty much just, I can actually show you just to be sure we're clear on where I put that. Here's the discount date column. Let me go over to the font, text transparency. Here's our formula. And I was just basically, if it's allowed, then just don't do any kind of transparency. Else, 75% transparent. So that seems to work very well with the themes. as opposed to trying to overwrite the background color property. Let's switch back over to our slides. Okay, the next thing I wanted to discuss was dealing with the fact that data window buttons don't get themed if they're showing images. This is something we ran into, and we were looking for a solution that would work nicely both if theming was on and off. So what we found was actually using a font under theming and toggling whether we were displaying an image or a font character. That works by basically using a symbol graphical font to display an image. For example, Seago UI symbol has been in Microsoft Windows since version 7. And there's just a lot of images. It's like Windings, but more professional. And also with Windows 10, there's Seago UI MDL assets, which has even more imagery, like their calculator program and stuff. Pull some of the glyphs out of that one. So what we can do is we're going to actually leverage these so that when we're theming, we display a character so it gets themed correctly, but the character will look just like the picture, ideally of it's like a save icon. The save disk BMP would be replaced by a save glyph from a font. So let's take a quick peek at that. So how do we do this? Besides the apply theme function, there is a new get theme function, which will return the name of the current theme or an empty string if there isn't a theme active. And we can call that get theme function within a data window expression, which basically gives us our solution. What we'll do is we'll set up two expressions on a button object. One that will look at the theme, and if there is a theme defined, we're going to show a character code that will be pulled from the symbol font. Otherwise, we're just going to show nothing. And then correspondingly, we flip it. And if there is no theme, we want to go back and show the original graphic. Otherwise, an empty string. So based on this, whether there's a theme in effect or not, we're going to get two different effects. So let's do a quick demo here. So let me start this without any theme so you can see the original graphic. Okay, images. So here's a data window. It's a simple one. It just got the little graphical PNG for a save icon at the end. Now if we go back over to our application and we change it to theme. So let's just do blue. Now when we run it, you'll see, went too far. Now you can see it's got that flatter look, that material design look. So let's, and this is actually using a graphic out of the MDL2 font. So this would be Windows 10 only, but this is more just an illustration. So if we look at the actual code for how we're doing that, it's pretty simple. So here's our image button. So there it is. You can see already there's text and graphic right on top of each other. And let's, but you can see, so picture file, expression. I'm hard coding my path, not a good thing. But when it's the theme equals an empty string, when there is no theme, let's show the graphic, else let's not. And then correspondingly on the text, when there is a theme, let's display that little save icon from the font, and otherwise don't display anything for the text property. And then finally over here you can see I'm using the Seago font, and I jacked up the size a bit to make it appear closer to the original size of the PNG image. So that actually works well. Nice thing too is, like I said, it does have that material look. And let me just show you again. So you can see the coloring there matches the coloring of the text. So if we change over to, for example, the dark theme now. Run this. Okay, you'll be able to see, so now it's following what the standard button colors are. So it works out nice, clean, and it's a crisp, simple look, and it goes well with the flat design. Let's see, those were the two main tips. Let's jump back to our slides. And so yes, it gives you that flatter look, more material design look. One final note on this is that besides Seago, there are other image fonts out there. I know our web team had recommended a font called Font Awesome that's used in a lot of websites to do a very similar thing. Just be aware though that currently Font Awesome 5, I found out after much fighting with it, is broken under Windows and it does not render under Windows GDI. Um, so just to be aware of, if you're trying to use that font, you're going to have issues. You can also create your own fonts. There are tools out there, so you can create your own set of glyphs. That's actually what we're doing for our application, just to be sure we don't, have any dependencies on anything that might change. Hopefully not. But so finally, last topic here is I wanted to talk about some coding solutions to extend the built-in functionality. And we have three services that we came up with to help make the themes integrate better with our system. There's a color table. As I was mentioning, there's really no way in the system, within the code, to currently get the colors for the themes, like what's being used for a particular text property or command button background color. Um, so that was what this first piece of logic will do. It'll let you actually query the theme colors at runtime from code. Next up is a property restorer. Since the theming engine is pretty indiscriminate, it's just going to override any colors with the ones from the theme. If you do have special cases where you need a particular color to emphasize something, this logic here will let you restore it back once the theming's applied. And finally, there is the expression fixer. If you don't want to use the font transparency setting trick when you're trying to use an expression to make a field look disabled, this will actually update the color values in an expression to match values from the theme file. So let's jump in. This will be the last thing we look at. We'll see a demo of all this. So let me flip back over to here. Okay, and let me turn this off just to always start from a place where you can see the problem. Okay, services. Oh, that was dumb of me. Dumb of me. Of course, you're not going to get any theme color table when there's theming disabled. So this is working fine. But if we go and put the theme back on, so blue or black, you can see here's your color palette for each one of these settings from the theme.json file. These are the values that are currently being used. So this will actually let you, access any property, by name. And what this actually is if we look at the theme.json, so you can see how it's mapped. If we look at a theme.json file, you can see that there's a path down through the hierarchy. So command dot normal state dot border color, or command button dot normal state dot border color, and what the color table is showing you is the flattened path with the periods in between. So if we pop back over here, you can see, so command button dot normal state dot border color, that's the current HTML color for it and the current PB color. So if we change this here, silver, and we run this, we'll see a different color table. So again, the colors are updated, so you can get the correct color based on the current theme, in case you need to make some custom changes to get things to look right with the general theming. So let's look at that. That's all in the everything I'm showing you right now is in this theme services pibble. The color table is actually this NCST theme info. I was planning on expanding it and adding some more stuff, but right now it's just essentially dealing with colors. Let's look inside here. Pretty much from the outside, the big thing is there's a get color property value. So once you instantiate it, there's really no setup. It automatically finds the theme.json based on the rules of, are you running out of the IDE or are you running out of an exe? And once it finds the theme.json file that's in effect, it'll parse it using the JSON parser and build a data store of the property name and the color value. So main function in here really is this get property value, so that you can just call this with the name, that flattened version that I was showing you in the color table, and it will return the PowerBuilder color as a long here, or -1 if there is no property in the theme with that name. As far as the code go and how it works, pretty much if we look at this build color table, um, we find the theme file, if there's one associated right now with the running application, and then we just parse it. And parsing is pretty straightforward. Just use a JSON parser. Load it up, parse it. Uh, so we start parsing at the root, and this is just a simple recursive, look at the current object. If the current object's a string, I'm differentiating, finding the color properties by looking for a value that starts with the £sign to indicate a hex value. So if it finds one of those, grabs it, figures out the PV color, corresponding PV color for the HTML value, and then adds both of those to a running data store that collects these all up. And if it turns out to be another object nested down further in the JSON file, then it just recurses and it calls itself again. It's pretty much it for as far as it works. There is one other, so there's a get property value. The other one is you can copy the entire data store out, the entire color table to data store or data window with those two copy methods. And this will actually come in useful. We'll build the one of the other services upon this. And right now it's just a simple NVO. It doesn't inherit from anything, so you could change it as you need to integrate it with your framework. Next up would be I'm gonna put this back to off now. We'll look at the property restorer. So let me save this and let me run. See the issue. So here's our data window. You can see here we have some custom coloring, text object that has a warning if this field is greater than that field, and then some custom row coloring to indicate that the rows are these rows can't be deleted because they've been built. So let's see what happens when we apply the theme. Actually, let's go dark. Dark always shows it best. Okay, property restorer. So you can see that when we themed it, we lost that. The color's not there. So if we look at our solution for this, there is a restore property NVO, specifically for restoring color properties. Let me show you the setup here on how it's called. Open the window here. And functions, register restored properties. So what I'm doing with these is I have two. I have one for each data window because these are actually data window services that we have in the PFC that get registered and turned on for a given data window. So that's why they're broken out as two. But all you really need to do is just for each one of those properties, just give it the full expression. So the DWO dot and the color property. And that's pretty much it. And it's going to leverage the fact that, as I was saying, that it designed at runtime, even when you query the color properties, you get the design time value back. You don't get the runtime. So just with this, we have all the information we need to restore the color. So we just register the these property expressions. And then what will happen is that when we actually call the function to restore, jump back over to here. I'll just show it to you in the service. To restore the colors, it's just going to run through and get an internal data store, find all the properties that have been registered, get the current value back out in our describe, because again, that's the design time color, and then just assign it back. One thing I did run into that was interesting is there's a optimization in the data window that if you try to set the color back to itself exactly, it will not take effect, and the theme just sits there. So actually, a little bit of a cheat and something probably to be aware of if you have any business logic depending on colors is I have to tweak the color by one on the blue channel by one level. So it's imperceptible on the screen, but it's enough of a change for the data window to accept the change and actually restore the colors. So if we jump back over to here, and here's our restore button. like I said, we had the two restore services. So we just call, once the data window is assigned somewhere down the, if you have a data object change process or something and you're in a framework, or at some point after the data window is assigned, you can just call these the restore colors. So if we watch how that happens, see, yep, still in a dark theme. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. So back over to services, property restore. So now if we click restore properties, there the colors came back because, again, like I said, they're in. The important thing is that there's, you query the data window and you're still getting the original colors back. Last thing I wanted to show you was a expression updater. I think we can actually look at this right now. This is that problem where if you have a formula on a field, the theming engine's not going to touch it, and it's just going to leave it, at the original, whatever the original colors were, which is going to usually clash particularly with these dark themes. So I can, since it's completely broke, it's not changing the color at all. So if we pop back over to here, there is a color expression updater. And let me show you how that's set up. So again, there's a function here. This is on just our demo window. Register expressions. So this is the service in use. There's just an instance variable for the expression updater, and you can register a data window object with it, and you can actually register a couple of things. You can register a particular data window by name, or data window object by name, like a specific column. But you can also say, for all column objects, on their background color properties, if they have a expression, in that expression, wherever you see this value, replace it with the value from the theme file, the current theme. So here you can see we're dealing with this will be the disabled color we've chosen for our normal design time old look application, and we just want to replace it at runtime with the correct something that looks disabled that goes with our theme as far as what disabled should look like. And then similarly for that same property, there'll be the corresponding non-disabled color, the active color. So we want to have a value to update that expression there as well, to get the normal editable color value. So those are the two we're registering here, and let's go ahead and run this. You'll be able to see, and when I do that, so we fixed the expressions using colors from the current theme palette. So canceled is the only time these are enabled. You can see the color went to the dark color. Disabled on a dark theme is just a headache. This actually gets lighter. It was the best I could do. So makes it look like the current theme. It puts it back in line so it doesn't stand out. And so let's take a quick peek in there. Let's see how that's working. So jump back over to this guy. This one is leveraging that color table, the NCST theme info object, so that it can figure out, here's the color, given the color path from the theme file, here's the color we want to use. And as I was saying, there's actually different, you can register a specific object, ASV, DWO name. You don't care what type it is, and there's a central register entry function in here that both map to. That we're basically just filling an internal data store with just values to indicate, and wildcards are used to indicate, I don't care what the name is or the type is. So there's a register object, and then there's the register type, which is the one we were using. So we don't really care what the name is, but the type is going to be column or text or any of the other DWO types. Finally, there's actually a register property I've tossed in. This doesn't care what it is at all. It's just, if anything has a property like background.color, here's the original color you should find in the expression. Here's the color I want you to replace it with. Pretty much, if we look at the only other thing I wanted to point out in here, so let's see, update colors. Yeah, this is just going to run through the data store. A little bit of extra logic that we have to deal with if you had any kind of wildcard. If you said you wanted a coverage thing, we need to build up a map. But pretty much it's just going to loop through the data store and fix the color expressions. So if we look inside update color expression, there is one little catch that I realize. Okay, this is the, yeah, this first checks to see is there actually a formula for the value, and if so, then we're actually we have something to update. And here it is, and this is the final thing where we get the expression out and the theme color out, and then we take the expression and update it. Right now, this is a very brutish algorithm. It's just doing a simple string of search and replace. We don't use many simple colors in the system. Obviously, the thing you'd run into is if your color value is a substring of another color value, you could get into problems. I'll leave it as an exercise for the viewer to come up with a better algorithm than this. Probably, since unfortunately in the expressions the color values aren't quoted, it's a little hard to pick them out. So you'd have to probably parse the expression. But for right now, it's a dumb approach, but it is working for us. And then you can see finally here we set it back in once we update the expression. We set it back into the data window for that, that property expression, and that gets us the effect we were looking for. That suddenly those formulas are back working, and the colors are looking correct. Since they're not being based off the current theme and not the hard-coded design time values. As I mentioned, all these the session examples will be in this theme services pibble will be available for download with the session materials. Excuse the quick edit, but since I had a little bit more time remaining in my session, I thought I'd show you something that I think is a pretty cool new feature coming in PowerBuilder 2019 R2, and that's the Perk control theming. But just PowerBuilder 2019, it's, as I mentioned earlier, it's an all or nothing. If you theme a data window, they all theme. Though with 2019, you can have exceptions for that. And what I have right here is just a small little extra application sample I created to demonstrate this. So let's go ahead and run this just as it is. This is without any theming, so you can see a chessboard here. Some color that's, the checkerboard's obviously necessary, the pattern, some data over here. So now let's go ahead and just turn on theming for this. And go to the application object as before. And we'll do dark for this one. And if I click OK and I run now, you'll see that since the theming engine takes over, it's going to do the data windows, everything. So we're losing our checkerboard because it's just overwriting the background of the data window with the solid color. This would be something we'd want to keep, though. We'd like to look at that and the buttons. That worked out nice. The tabs. So this half right here we want to stay with, but we want to bring this area on here back. So what you can actually do with R2 is, if we pop over to here, you traditionally have your theme.json file. So it's working out with the sections, and here's the section for data windows. And because I have that set to true, it's just going to theme all data windows. There's no really way to stop it from doing that. As of straight PowerBuilder 2019 R2, it's more flexible. What we can do with R2, you can create a separate theme JSON file, and you can call it whatever you want as long as it's theme hyphen whatever you choose .json. So here I have theme hyphen chess.json, and what you can put in here is overrides, and how they work is it's the path. It's a fully qualified control path down through the visual control hierarchy to a particular control that you want to override and have a different style theming for. So for in my case here, if we look at the window for this, you'll see that this and this and this are data windows, and this is DW player 1 info, this is DW board, and this guy down here is DW player 2 info. So if we go back over and look in this file, you'll see I have overrides set up where, for w_main, that's the window they're sitting on, that's the most parent, .dw board, I turn drawing off for that data window. Similarly for player 1 and player 2, I turn the drawing off. One other thing I did is not only can you turn the drawing off, you can override the individual properties, which is sort of cool. So in this case here, instead of the title following the theme, where it says the player 110, if we pop back over here, that would be this here, this right here, st_title, which would normally follow the text color of the theme. We want to show that in white, even with the flat dark theme, so that it stands out a little bit more. And then lastly, what I did was for the play button, um, there is I overrode it, so I wanted to show the play button in green. So that's the color right there is green. So if we go back over here now, and all we need to do is we have to make sure that that file, let's see here, that file is in the same folder as the original theme.json. So let me go over to where I have that saved. Give me 1 second. There she is. Okay, let me grab that. So that's the theme. Theme hyphen chess. If I go back over to the default directory where the themes are stored. Oop. Oh, that was right. And we go to dark. I'm going to paste that in. So now they're sitting together, so the engine will look for these exceptions before falling back on the default theme rules. So let me run this now. And you'll see that we've restored that area, that it's back. It's no longer being themed per the default theming. We've turned theming off for the checkerboard and the top and bottom player areas. Tabs and everything else are still being themed. There's that white where we overrode it in the file right here. Text font. Let me slide that over a little bit and bring this to the front. So that right there is coming from that clause. And then there's the green play button, and that's right there. And we're only overriding the individual properties, so like the the highlighted states, they still track. So when it's just standard, you see it as green here, normal state. But when I hover over it, we didn't pick a different color for hover, so it's just the same hover color as the other hover states, since there's nothing in the file over here that says for hover state. But it's an important feature. It makes this a lot more production worthy. You can do a lot more because I'm sure the vast majority of real world applications are going to have situations where you have some custom data window being used for something out of the norm where you can't afford to have the colors change. So this is a very wanted feature. So thanks. Just thought I'd pop this in there. So thank you.